Hey, how's it going everybody? Brad the Guitarist here. This video we're going to look at this thing. This is an early 1970s Acoustic Control Corp. Not an acoustic as in like an acoustic guitar, but an Acoustic Control Corp Black Widow guitar.
Black Widow guitars were first made in California in small numbers by a builder named Bartell, starting in about 1969 or 1970. Some may have been labeled Bartell, but most were under the contract to Acoustic Control Corporation, a company better known for their cutting-edge solid-state amplifiers. In about 1971, the guitars began to be built in Japan by Matsumoku. Although still built to a high standard, it's generally agreed that these are not quite as nice as the Bartells. Sometime near the end of the product run, Simi Mosley of Mosrite fame began building Black Widows for acoustic. It is estimated that only about 200 of these were built by Mosley. In an interview with Tape Op magazine, Harvey Gerst, a product designer for Acoustic Control Corporation and a guitarist for the band Sweetwater, related the story of how he met Jimi Hendrix and had his acoustic Black Widow stolen by Jimi.
I got a call on Saturday morning from Steve Marks, the president of Acoustic, saying, "Go down to TGG right now." Why? Jimi Hendrix just bought 4 of our amps and he's having trouble with some of the controls. I'd seen Jimi, but had never had the chance to talk to him. I showed him what he wanted to know about the amp. Then I said, "Here's another thing they can do. Let me borrow your guitar." We're both left-handed. I go to show him this feature, and his strings are like medium gauge. I'm used to extra super slinky, and they're way up from the fretboard. I hand it back to him and say, "I can't play this. Let me go get mine." Mine was the acoustic Black Widow, 24 frets to the body, so you can play 2 full octaves. The heel doesn't start until after the 24th fret. I walk in, take it out and show him the neat little thing. He's not even listening. He's just staring at my guitar. It's left-handed. He's got nothing but right-handed Strats. When I finished showing him some things, he just held out his hands and said, "Gimme." He starts playing that thing, starts tape rolling, and I'm going, "Why do I even play guitar?" He finishes playing. I answered all his amp questions, and said, "I gotta go. Can I have my guitar back?" He says, "My guitar?" I say, "No, that's my guitar." He starts laughing and says, "Not anymore. Now it's my guitar." I say, "Hey look, I'm not a salesman. I play in a band. What am I gonna use?" He points at the floor where 4 of his white Strats are laid out and says, "Help yourself." Of course I wanted another Black Widow. I called Steve Marks and told him what happened. He said, "He wants it? Give it to him. Don't worry. You'll get one back." I take one of Jimi's Strats to use. Like a dummy, I didn't have him sign it. I'm gonna play this guitar on the road, and I hate it. The action's up way too high. The damn knobs are getting under my arms because it's upside down. Every time I strum I hit the volume knob. Can't keep the damn thing in tune. I put super slinky strings on, and it made the bridge even worse, and now the action's even higher. I'm having to intonate this damn thing every night. I go through a set of strings in one playing. Finally, a month later my Black Widow comes in. I ran into Jimi in the airport in Oakland, and asked him, "How are you liking the Black Widow?" He says, "I love it. It's my studio guitar." I said, "Well, I finally got my new Black Widow in, so here's your street back." He stared at me for a second, then said, "Huh?" I said, "Here's your street. I don't need it anymore." "Oh. Okay." It wasn't until a few years later I was telling this story that it hit me. He wasn't expecting me to give the street back. He was giving it to me. And I, like an idiot, gave it back to him, one of the first 4 Strats he owned. What's it worth today? About $500,000.
This one has actually been on the channel before. This used to be owned by me. I sold it to a fellow, and at the time I sold it to him, he knew what was up. I told him, "Man, this thing needs some work. It needs setup work, and the frets are low, and you know, it's not perfect." Normally, this is not something I would have just flipped and sold. I would have done more to it, but you know, there's been a lot of just areas where somebody's come in to try to make it look better, but it's not perfect and it's not great. It's a player grade, but it's a player grade instrument of a rare instrument. There are not a whole lot of these, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting. This has got an interesting bridge on it. It's just different than anything you will see outside of Mosrite, so that should be interesting to kind of work with. It's very solid though. A lot of brass there. It's like plated brass, you can see. So it should have, you know, pretty good sustain. Mosrite pickups. This was missing one of the knobs whenever we did the trade that we did, or I can't remember exactly what our deal was, but he's found one since and replaced it. So I think the electronics are correct, but I'll have to look again. There was some kind of problem up here where this switch was changed, and you know, obviously it had been hit by something and crushed in right here, which broke this area of wood, and somebody tried to patch that and didn't do a great job, frankly. I think they were trying to do it the best they could do it, and just to make it player grade, you know. So that, I guess they succeeded at that more or less, but we're going to try to make it play even better. So yeah, that'll be the object of today's video. Check out my rose bush, man. This thing is like exploded with life. This is after having a bunch of roses taken off of it. I got a bunch in my house off of this bush. Tons. I could probably sell these, but I don't want to go to the farmer's market, so let's repair a guitar instead.
Okay, so let me read the list of what this guy says the problem is. The story is that some dude was supposed to set it up, but did some weird-ass things to it. He unshimmed the neck, so there was a shim in the neck, and I guess he took it out. Took the nut off, and didn't glue it back on. Took spacers out from under the pickups. Yeah, these should have had spacers under the pickups to lift them up, and I don't know if you could see it or not, but the spacers kind of probably need to be there, as well as the shim, because the shim would kick this neck back into a position that would probably make a lot more sense to get the action down. I don't know if you could tell it or not, but the action is pretty damn high up high on this neck. If this has been set up, you know, usually I don't like to criticize other techs, but I'm not sure. Maybe it moved over the winter or something. That sometimes does happen, so I'm not gonna presume too much. But you know, apparently he wasn't happy with it when he got it back in the beginning. But this should have had some shims under these pickups. And let me see if they're in the case. Did he remove them and keep the shims? Maybe that's what's supposed to jack up the pickups, is those little rubber grommets. That might be what's up with that. We've got 4 pots here and a switch that would have come out of it. And, you know, they're definitely crusty, so I don't blame anybody for changing these. But the problem I could see is, look at this. This would have had kind of like a Gretsch style thing. It would have had a big pad on the back. You see all these holes here. He's taken the pad off, and he has that, so that's not a big deal. But normally there would be a big red pad on the back of this covering the whole back. Look at how messy all of this is. If this is new wiring harness, I mean, this is all really messy. I mean, those are definitely newer pots. That's a newer pot. That's from 2020 right there. That pot, I believe. 2036, that's 2000. Looks like 2020 to me, so that looks pretty recent. It's wired, but look at how weirdly that's wired. It's through the hole up and around, and it's soldered up on the leg of the pot rather than through the hole. You know, that right there's okay, the way that looks like that's done, but I'm not sure why there would be a blob on the back of the pot unless it was just a reused pot. Another thing I notice is that with that capacitor right there, I mean, see how the leg has been ripped up the side of the capacitor? See right there? You see how the leg has been ripped out of the body of the capacitor up the side about halfway? And on this side too? Well, that really severely weakens the seal on the capacitor, for one. So the capacitor will be more susceptible to problems later on. Now, in a guitar, it's probably not that big a deal. If this was in an amplifier, that would be a bigger deal. But also, it weakens the connection to the foil, to the inside foil. So, you know, that connection right there has been weakened by the way it's been installed. That wouldn't have come from the factory like that. So that's screwed up. The ground wire, instead of replacing the ground wire to basically be able to reach, it's just been kind of tacked on right there. It's not the end of the world, but it's still kind of slapdash and sloppy. And then you've got another ground wire coming from over here, right there, that black one. So that comes from there and then ties in over here for some damn reason. It's just adding to the mess, really. So, you know, I've not been really given a mandate to mess with the wiring. Like I said, when I traded him this guitar, I had done nothing to it. Zero, zilch. And the thing was, at the time, you know, he saw this guitar before it was really available for sale. Because what I used to do is I would trade for or buy an instrument, and then I would fix it up. I would put all the work into it, everything necessary to be able to sell it, and be assured that the person would be happy with it more times than not. You know, and on vintage instruments, you know, that sometimes can be hit and miss. You can't make all things perfect necessarily on a vintage instrument. But I would fix the most obvious things, and I would try to restore things as much as I could to sort of a factory standard, where possible. In this case, these have been changed, and I didn't do this work. This is not professionally done. This is one of those things where if I spend more time rewiring all this stuff, I'd have to probably charge him more than I'm sure he wants to pay. And if he's already paid for this once, probably not worth it to him. But I'll check it and see if it's all working and if it's quiet. And if it's quiet and working, then I will just leave it. But this is one of those kind of cautionary examples of, man, make sure that, if somebody's going to work on your guitar, make sure they know what they're doing, at least enough that they can, wire your stuff in without it looking like that. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have to worry about the spacers if I simply just set everything up differently, but I'm not sure why he jacked this way up like that. Unless it was just buzzing on the first fret. That's probably what it was. It was getting a bunch of buzz on the first fret, and he had to jack it way the hell up. But the problem isn't with that. The problem is with the truss rod. The truss rod needs to be turned. But the fact that the truss rod cover is off of this thing, yeah, this might be an issue, because if the truss rod cover is off already, that means somebody probably already has screwed with the truss rod to try to adjust it, and they might have been trying to adjust out some kind of buzz like down here on the first or second fret, and they couldn't adjust it out, so they ended up having to adjust the bridge upward to accommodate for that, and it's way jacked up on the bridge. So this might be a bit more lengthy than I had anticipated. We'll see. It's always hard to tell on camera with these things, but just sighting down the neck, I can see that there is a little bit of a back bow in this neck. It's not perfectly straight, and it doesn't have any forward relief. There's a little tiny bit of a back bow, so that it's possible that can be adjusted out, and then this thing might be okay. But let's see. Looks like we've got a 1/4 inch adjustment on that, so let's get a 1/4 inch so we can adjust that truss rod. Okay, what I'll do a lot of times when you got truss rods like this is I'll just drop a 1/4 inch socket down in there, and then I'll use like either a nut driver if I've got one handy, or even just a flathead will work. So I think that's correct. So this is probably going to be the same way as 90% of 99% probably of all other truss rods, in that when you tight, it's righty-tighty, so if you turn to the right or clockwise, that's going to tighten the truss rod, which is going to drag it backwards and make a back bow. We want a forward relief in this, so we want to go counterclockwise or this way, so we're going to turn it just a little bit. Now, I haven't even seen if the thing's in tune. I just know for a fact already, without even checking any of that I'm going to have to take some relief out. I'm going to put some forward relief in this. So let's just turn this slightly this way. And it felt like it may have just slipped. I don't know if the nut is trying to strip out. That would be really shitty if it is. There we go. Yeah, it was turning for sure. And I'm just turning it fractions of a turn really at a time. And then I check it in between. But right now, it's got a slight twist, but it's not a big twist. But on this side, it looks pretty straight all the way down. It's going to be kind of hard to see because the camera tries to refocus. It's pretty flat on this side. And on the other side, there's a little bit of a forward bow. So there's a slight twist in the neck, but it's not bad. And I don't think it's anything that's going to give us any problems. It's very common to have a slight twist in a neck just simply because you have more pressure on one side than you do on another side on a neck usually anyway. So that's not uncommon. But I think we might be okay with that right there. There's definitely less buzz than there was at that first fret. But my God, is the action high on this. I mean, look at the action up here on this. Terrible up here. Look at that. That's crazy high. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll adjust this down. And like I say, I'm not worried about tuning quite yet. All I'm doing is I'm just going to get the action about where I think it's going to need to be. And then we will tune it up and kind of worry about things from there. But see, that's more like where it needs to be, something kind of in that ballpark. So that's tuned up to pitch. You can hear a buzz on the open string, a little bit of buzz on the first, and a little bit of buzz on the second. No buzz really to speak of on the third. It's not that bad. Fourth is pretty good. 5 is good. So it seems pretty good after that. These first couple of frets, though, might be a bit low. And before anybody makes a snide comment, I just wanted to say, yes, I realize that I should really do final setups in the playing position, but we're just trying to get things close right now and get an idea where it is. This is not a final setup, so keep your panties on for a moment. Let's show you the frets. They definitely need some work, the frets. They need some attention, for sure. There are some scars and stuff on the frets that are kind of unsightly and probably would make noise, like right in there. There's some scars in the frets, and they just kind of look ugly. There's a little dent right there, a little dent there. This might be a case where one more level and crown on this would hold him off from having to do more drastic fret work, such as a complete or partial refret. But the problem right now is mainly that when you hit an open string, you're getting a little bit of buzz down here, and I can show you why. Look. Okay, so he said he took the nut out and didn't glue it back in, but look at the nut. Look at that. Right there. It's up off of the neck. It's not even flat down to it. And look, the low E string is not even touching the 0 fret right there. Neither is the A string isn't either. Look at that. Look at how far away that one is from the 0 fret. Look, none of these are touching. The B is. But look at that. And imagine, look at the difference from this point to this point. Now tell me your intonation is going to be on and you're going to get a good sound out of your guitar with that in that state. You're not. So there is no way that this guitar was set up by this person at any point to any degree of decency. I'm sorry, but this is bad. Look at that right there. Look how far away from that 0 fret that is. And what's even worse probably is how close that one is, because that's going to buzz like hell when you hit that string. And the E too, look, it's not even touching. But it just is right off of it. So when you pluck that string, it's it's, you know, it's vibrating against that and buzzing. Really stupid. So the strings are gonna have to come off. The nut slot is gonna have to be filed down and flattened to accommodate the nut. But the nut is just a guide on this. The 0 fret is really where it's most important. We might have to replace the 0 fret to jack it up a little bit. We'll have to look at that maybe after the fact, but what I'll do probably is just keep these strings on for testing purposes. That way I won't slap new strings on and I'll keep having to take them on and off and on and off. But I'll loosen these and we'll go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and get that nut off of there actually, yeah. So usually what I do like this is just yeah, this is not the kind of thing you want to just not glue in because it has to stay in place. Okay, check this out. This is pretty unbelievable. Really unbelievable, actually. Look at this. So we've got part of an old shim on here. It doesn't even go all the way across. And we've got a whole bunch of glue right there in the center. And there's glue all the way across as well. And then there's old glue over here on this side. I mean, this is really bad. I mean, I don't know. Look at how far down it dips in the center right there. That's got to be that's the worst bodged thing I think I've ever seen as far as a nut on a guitar. That about takes the cake right there. I mean, I don't know why there would be a shim, but only on half of the not even half, but like a quarter of the thing, and then a giant bulge of glue. And then here on the slot we've got also a bunch of old glue. At least it looks relatively flat on the nut slot right there, but still that could stand to be cleaned up some. We've got issues with the 0 fret. Obviously there's dimples in the 0 fret, but seriously, that is just disgusting to look at, something like that. And that's something that somebody was charged for. So here's the deal. I talked to my customer and he said when he took the guitar to this dude, he took the nut off and told him he was going to replace it. I don't know why you would do that. This is the original nut for this vintage instrument. And it's not even really acting as the nut. It's a nut, yes, but it's just a guide because there's 0 fret. Unless it was just a string space issue. But he didn't say anything about complaining about the spacing of the strings. So I don't know what the deal is with that. But that's just obviously not right. And we're going to scrape all that crap off the bottom of it. And I think by the time we scrape the crap off the bottom of that and level out the 0 fret, maybe do a very slight level crown polish on these frets, it's probably going to get us 90% of the way there, and it'll be pretty good after that, I think. Just silly. It's really silly that the dude did not try to remove that stupid piece of shim and all that extra glue. Just really ridiculous. Yeah, I may have to sand the rest of this off. I think it's probably what I'll do here in a sec, but anyway, that got most of it. Jeez, it's already 100 times better than it was after about 5 seconds. I think that'll about get it right there. Okay, there's so much old glue in this nut slot that it's just really nasty looking. So we'll have to get rid of all that. Jeez, there's just piles of this stuff on here. Man. That's much better than it was. There's much less crap there now. Sometimes I find it useful to use the old nut to kind of get the crap out of the groove right up next to the front edge there, because it's, you know, it's theoretically it should be the correct shape to begin with, and you want that to conform back to this. So it's sometimes it helps to just kind of use that as your sort of chipping device, chip some of that crap out of there. And it actually works really well. There's a bunch of it up here on top as well. So much of it still coming off. Okay, so that is much lower than it was, and that's really what you want. You want that to be low because the string has to pass over the 0 fret and then go down inside of that groove, and that groove has to be lower than the 0 fret. If the groove is higher than the 0 fret, then the 0 fret's doing nothing. That's, you know, defeats the purpose of a 0 fret. So I think that is probably going to get it right there. I mean, I might chip around on it just a little bit more, but there's way less adhesive there than there was. Okay, the action is still a little high on the high E side, so let's go ahead and lower that down as much as we can without buzzing. Okay, let's go ahead and test out the electronics, because those didn't look so hot in the back whenever I was looking at those. Well, they work. That's about all I can say for them. There's some little quirks I can see. The switch is probably backwards from where I would like to see it, but... And the pots are obviously not the right taper from what I can tell as well. Okay, so I pretty much have the thing all done. A couple things I noticed though. On these saddles, the saddles are not radiused. That means that the distance from the bottom of this barrel, or from the screw down here up to the slot where the string passes through, is pretty much the same all the way across for these strings. It's a little bit lower for the low strings, but it does not follow a radius. Ideally, you want your saddles, your low E to be the lowest and your high E to be the lowest, and then step up slightly, and follow the radius of the fretboard. So if it's a 9.5 inch radius, you want these to roughly follow that same radius in the slot depth. These do not do that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to figure out what the radius of this fretboard is. Looks to me like it might be about a 9.5. A 9.5 looks pretty darn spot on. Okay, so if I take my radius gauge right here, you can see it's sitting down on top of the two screws at each end, and I believe you're going to be able to see that the low E string is pretty close to the gauge. This string is pretty close to the gauge, so is this string. Then these strings get a little further away. You can see some space there. You can see the shadow and the space there. And on this high E string, you can see how far away the shadow is from the string there, and how far up off of it that one is. So that's way wrong. We're going to go ahead and file these out to get those a lot closer to that gauge. I want to kind of point the file downward where it passes through the tail, so that the string ramps up. You want it to ramp up through the saddle, because if it doesn't ramp up through the saddle at the correct angle, you're going to get all kinds of weird buzzes and noises. Actually, what I may have to do here is go power tool with this. These files are not really made for metal on metal, so I mean it's working, it's filing some out, but it's not really what it's not ideal, is it? Okay, that is worlds better right there. So all of the saddles are now correct. They're all ramped up in the middle as they should to follow the contour of the fretboard, the radius. Consequently, the action is exceptionally low. Really nice action on this now. The nut is way better, way better. It's actually the way it's supposed to be. It may look like there's a little bit of a gap there, but I can slip my thumbnail underneath that edge, but it doesn't go too far. The thing about gluing on nuts, what you need to understand about it doesn't take much glue to hold a nut in place. You just put one little drop of super glue kind of in the middle over here. That's going to pretty much hold it. You don't need to slather a whole shit ton of glue on there. Actually really happy with the way that came out, and it sounds great. And again, the nut is only being used as a guide for the strings because we have a 0 fret, and all of the indentations are out of the 0 fret. The pitch of the neck is the relief is very good. You can check relief if you want to by sighting. I usually just sight down the neck, but it's easier to show in a video if you just depress on the first string, depress on like the 12th, or excuse me, the first fret, the 12th fret, and then you just kind of look about the 5th or 6th frets right in here and see if you got some relief. And this one does have a little bit of relief there, so I think that's about what I want. It's the same on the high E pretty much as it is on the low E. So this thing is smooth as silk as far as the playing. It's ready to go, I believe. Okay, so now it's time to address the issue with the wiring. So in order to do this, I wanted to start with a completely blank slate, so I took everything out of it, and we're going to use this little cupcake pan to create some shielding. So the first thing I want to do is tape back all of this wire, so we'll get it up and out of the way. And now that those are out of the way, we'll be able to create our shielding. In this case, like I said, I'm going to use this little cupcake pan. But you can use other things. You could use little pie pans. So now that I've got the basic shape, I'm going to cut the excess off with some scissors here. And I'll be taking this in and out a couple different times because I need to cut some slits in order to accommodate the wires, because they'll have to go back down inside of that cavity. I know that this looks a little bit budget, but this is actually really good shielding, and this guitar had no shielding whatsoever from the factory, so no matter what I do in terms of shielding, it's going to be superior to what it left the factory with. Here I'm using a little pair of needle nose to puncture the holes for all of the controls. The shielding actually has to connect to the shafts of the pots in order to get good grounding. During this part, I want to just speed things up. I don't want to make you watch a really long video. I dug through my stash of old capacitors and found some Aerovox capacitors that were made in Boston, Massachusetts, probably in about the 1950s. They're too old and leaky for amplifier use, but they would work perfectly here in this guitar. Kind of wiring this to more or less Gibson or SG specs, Les Paul specs, with a .022 capacitor. And I'm just trying to clean up the wiring in general. You know, like I said, when I got this thing, the wiring was just really, really sloppy. So I'm trying to clean things up. Right here, you can see the that's the output lead, and the shielding went all the way to the edge, so it was in danger of grounding itself. So I wanted to trim all that back and put shrink tubing on that. Here I'm adding some shielding tape to finish off the edge of the cavity. I would later provide the customer with some extra pieces to put on the back cushion for a 360-degree Faraday cage. I just wanted to clean everything up and really make it a lot more functional than it was. First of all, it had the wrong kind of pots in it. It had logarithmic pots instead of linear pots. For some reason, so many wiring diagrams call for logarithmic pots on the volume knobs, but that's not what you want on the volume. You want linear. So with all that changed, we are just about ready to give this thing a test. Okay, so here is the wiring for this thing complete. And doesn't it look much, much better? Couple of cool old vintage Aerovox capacitors for this thing. Changed the volume pots from logarithmic pots to linear pots. I don't know why a lot of people advise logarithmic pots for volume knobs, but that's really not what you want to do with a volume knob on a guitar. It just doesn't work well. You lose all of your volume, you know, within the first eighth of a turn, and then, you know, the rest of the knob is useless if you use a logarithmic pot. It's just, you know, it's just the way it is. Use a linear pot on your volume, and then you can use logarithmic on your tone. But yeah, that's much better. At least I think it is. I think it looks better. All these solder joints are nice and clean. So she's ready to go, ready to fire this thing up. Check, check, check. See, now the volume actually works, the control actually works smoothly from top to bottom. Listen. Rather than nothing, 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 all at once. Which is the way it was. Alright, so everything works. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, hit subscribe down below. And for now, we will see y'all later.